What is the latest on the federal government's gun buyback program? Prime Minister Mark Carney now says it's not a confiscation, but voluntary. What is Carney's definition of voluntary? Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangaree got caught on tape admitting that the whole thing doesn't make sense. So, where does this leave gun owners at? Joining us today to discuss this is Scott Sweetman. He is the Community Relations Chair of the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association Sports Shooting Facility. Scott, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. Those are great questions because the truth is everyone concerned, not just lawful firearm owners, but people that are concerned with private property rights and government transparency, are all left a bit gobsmacked with the whole situation. I mean, we had a minister coming out and being recorded, admitting what we've been saying since the beginning of all of this, stretching back into the 2020s, that it doesn't make sense, that 90% or greater of firearms used in any kind of crime come via the U.S. border and never come anywhere near law-abiding firearm owners. So the question is very valid given what we know so far.
Right. So the Prime Minister stated that the program is not confiscation, but it's voluntary. What kinds of responses are you getting on this claim from local gun owners?
A lot of confusion because a lot of the legacy media is carrying very one-sided statements. So what's been put in place, as I'm sure you and your viewers know, that there was a trial program launched very recently that is supposed to be what they're going to be basing the continuance of the program on. The problem is after the recording came out and all of that, something more serious occurred, and that was at the briefing of this trial launch. And it was stated by the minister that, this program has been going on since 2020, and that it would now be capped at a total of 742 million. Retroactively going back to 2020, and all of the expenses of this program, its IT portal, the call-in program, police collections, staffing, there's 152 people employed by this program. All of those funds are going to come out of this 742 million. The commercial dealers that have, I was going to say submitted, but that's a bit biased, who have complied and submitted about 13,000 firearms, those funds come out of it. So simple math based on the numbers that they released say that they can only compensate for about 13,000 more firearms, which greatly contrasts with their own information that doesn't take into account a lot of the historical pieces, but at over 1 million. So, voluntary is really the way he's describing a scarcity lottery.
Wow. And then what about Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangaree's comments, where he was caught on tape speaking to one of his rental tenants, admitting that legal gun owners aren't the problem, but that 90% of gun violence is happening with illegally imported guns from the U.S. He admitted that this gun grab is going ahead just to keep Quebec voters happy. Now the public safety minister is now saying his on-tape comments were misunderstood. What kind of feedback are you getting from gun owners and the general public on that?
Again, there's a bit of a disconnect. Firearm owners are incredibly well informed. We go through a vetting process, we go through training, we go through testing. If you have an RPAL, you're actually run through the CSIS, the RCMP CSIS computer every 24 hours. So daily, I'm checking to see that if I've committed a crime, as are most lawful gun owners in Canada. We are the most watched, vetted group of Canadian citizens, period. And we've known, and the police, every major police force has come out and said, we need that money to fight actual crime. Spending even the 742 million which is a terrific amount, but nowhere compensates the number of people that the Prime Minister and the previous had promised would be compensated for our lawfully acquired property. That money needs to fight real crime. And we are absolutely the farthest thing from criminals in Canada. So it's not a surprise to us. We are seeing more people wanting to inform themselves exactly on what's happening, because what the minister and prime minister have said don't make sense. And when the minister candidly admitted that it doesn't make sense, has raised some eyebrows in the non-firearm owning public in Canada.
And I'm told that the government intends to open an online portal for gun owners to declare both the firearms the government is aware of and the ones they aren't. But the government intends to only compensate for a fraction of the firearms currently in circulation. So what's going on here?
Yeah, that's the duplicitous part of this, is that they over 3,000 different firearm types have been added to the prohibited list. Many of those firearms went from non-restricted, meaning they were basically hunting rifles or sport shooting rifles that were used in competition or collection pieces, suddenly became prohibited overnight. So previously, the government had no registration information on those firearms. Certain firearms like AR-15s and pistols have been registered for a number of years. So the government has who owns them, and they're very easy for the government to find and confiscate. What they want is, they're trying to, through this scarcity raffle, this idea, and there's no guarantee that if you cooperate and say, oh, I have great grandfather's safari rifle and it happens to be over the joules, the energy allowed by the ban, and often those rifles are $10,000 plus the value on the market. If I notify the government that I have one, there's no guarantee that I will be compensated for that. Once they hit that limit, the minister said they will no longer compensate. And you won't know until you send in your firearm. You declare it, send it in. So they're hoping to create a race. And that by the scarcity, by setting this cap, they're going to motivate firearm owners basically to send in all of this information and the firearms without compensation. And that's apparently what the prime minister thinks the meaning of voluntary is. If you don't cooperate, the amnesty will end, according to the minister. If you don't send in the firearms that they've added to the list, you are de facto a criminal. And so your alternative to voluntarily submitting your firearm is the possibility of criminal action.
Right, because I was going to ask, what kind of consequences could someone face if they don't turn in their guns?
According to the Minister of Public Safety, none. He's apparently suggested in the video or the audio that I heard of him speaking, he suggested it probably won't be enforced, and if people lost money, or
Wow.
his friend or tenant lost money, he would pay it himself. I haven't received an email from him offering to do the same for me, but perhaps.
So does this possibly leave the door open to a class action lawsuit? Because if the government decides that someone's private property and purchase and is now illegal, and then they confiscate it, should there be a legal obligation to reimburse the individuals? In any other situation, this would be considered theft.
Unfortunately, in Canada, private property isn't protected in the law. So we think that
Wow.
in fairness, and that's why this argument is not about firearms. It is the first case, the first wholesale case, although not the first case, where the government has used the lack of private property protection in Canada to take property belonging to a lawful citizen that acquired it and is using it exactly as the law prescribed. So for most firearm owners, and that's the real problem, we are by definition law abiding, but this law is immoral in that we have followed all of the laws. We bought them, we trained, we passed the tests, we store them in safes. Most of us go above and beyond what's required. But now the government is blatantly lying to its citizens and saying, oh, it's voluntary, but it's not.
Wow. Now, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the Ontario Provincial Police have all said that they will not enforce the gun grab. So, what does this mean for gun owners in these provinces?
It's very problematic because although law enforcement is refusing to, in those provinces and some other jurisdictions, are refusing to enforce it, we've complied with the laws to this point. I'm a firearm owner, have been since the program's inception. I follow the laws exactly. So now, although Alberta's police will not enforce the law, if I don't turn over my firearms at the end of the amnesty, I will be breaking the law. I will be a criminal. So that's a moral dilemma that we as law-abiding citizens are being forced into.
So, how are you encouraging gun owners to respond to this gun grab?
Get involved, get informed. Everyone has to make a decision. The LFGA is not going to suggest people break the law. We're all about following the law. But this situation has put all of us in a very confusing situation, and individual firearm owners need to get active. They need to belong to a club. They need to support groups like the CCFR that are actively looking into legal challenges. They tried one, it was defeated. Mostly we need to inform Canadians what's happening, because I truly believe that most Canadian citizens do not believe the government has the right to put its citizens, its law-abiding citizens, in a situation where they have to follow an immoral law, an unjust law, or become criminals, even if the police aren't enforcing it. Most Canadians believe in doing right. We believe in following the law of the land. And that's put everyone, not just firearm owners, but private people who are concerned about private property. Because the same could be done with luxury watches, your car, anything that the government decides it wants to take, especially when the Minister of Public Safety has come out and admitted that it has nothing to do with the safety of our citizens at all.
Scott Sweetman is the Community Relations Chair of the Lethbridge Fish and Game Association Sports Shooting Facility. Scott, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.